All right, Matthew 25, 14 to 30. Read it, pray, and get started. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. Oh, also, by the way, this believer's eulogy. So, just in the church. It will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gives 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we come before you on this day, a day full of questions, of grief and loss, a day full of wonder. Lord, we come to your word on a day like this. We pray that you would give me wisdom as I speak, that you'd give me great compassion and clarity, that your word would speak to your people. You would be kind to us on a day like today, as you are every day. I pray this in your name. Amen. Amen. What do you do when your world is ending? I don't mean that some sort of crazy conspiracy theorist. I'm not here to tell you like when the world is going to end and how to prepare for it. I mean, what do you do when your world is ending? What do you do when things come to an end? Endings tend to clarify meaning, what actually matters. Right, the end of a college career, take advantage of your time in college because it's coming to an end. Time with your kids will eventually come to end. You should take advantage of it. So too with people, right? There's nothing like death to reinforce the reality that right now really matters. It causes us to wonder, what is a meaningful life, knowing that it is coming to an end? What is life to the fullest? Did Jane live life to the fullest? Did she live a life that mattered? And how can you and I do the same? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'd like to tag this sermon, Life to the Fullest. Life to the fullest. I wonder if you're asking those very questions. What is the point of it all? What even matters, knowing that it all comes to an end? Thankfully, we do find an answer in the Bible. It does speak to those deep and existential questions. In fact, Jesus himself had an answer to this question, and it might be a little bit surprising. We find that answer in Matthew chapter 25. And Jesus isn't just talking about the end of your life or my life. He's talking about the end of it all. See, his disciples, to give you a little context for where we're going to be, his disciples were remarking how beautiful everything was. They were in the temple area, specifically remarking how beautiful the temple was, the buildings that they had, essentially how wonderful things are right now. Jesus' warning to them was, all of this is coming to an end. To them, it would have been a cataclysmic declaration. It would have been as if to say the whole world is coming to an end. The temple to them was a symbol of security and stability. For it to fall down was to say that everything was falling down. The question is, if that is true, what is life to the fullest right now? And that is where we find ourselves today. In Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30, we find an answer to that question. What is life to the fullest? Knowing that all things come to an end, I think it's just this. Be faithful with what you've got, because the giver is coming back. Be faithful with what you've got, because the giver is coming back. Right there is the entirety of life to the fullest. A life that I hope you and I will live, a life that I believe Jane lived. The story begins with different provisions. See, in order to demonstrate that this is true, Jesus decides to tell a little story, a little parable about life to the fullest, knowing that it is coming to an end. And we find ourselves in the beginning in a place of different provisions. Right there in verse 14, the story is of a man, a master over a household, who was going on a journey, and he entrusted to his different servants different amounts of his property to take care of while he was gone. That's the setup for the story. And right away, you might be wondering, that's great and all, but doesn't it seem a little bit unfair? After all, if we're talking about life to the fullest, it feels like some people have a better opportunity of life to the fullest than others. Some servants get more or less than others. Doesn't it seem a little bit unfair? If he was really a good master, would he give equally to all people? Now, before we get to that, we should just point out here, it says that he gave them talents. A talent doesn't make sense in our world, but in their world, it was about 20 years worth of wages. So yes, they are getting different amounts, but they're all getting a lot. The master is all giving them abundant opportunity for life to the fullest. But even more than that, I think, doesn't this just describe the world that we live in? There are some people who seem to have more than others. There are some people that seem to have more opportunities or more giftings or more ability than others. And the question then is, does everyone have an opportunity to live life to the fullest? The question is, who has value in a world like that? Who has value in a world like ours? What is a life of value? Did Jane live a life of value? I wonder what your answer would be to that question. I wonder what the answer is without God. I do think, perhaps you have an answer, I don't know. I do think that without God, it does come down to a little bit with what you got. That people with 5 talents are a little bit more valuable than people with 2 talents. Because they can provide more, they can do more. The people with more abilities and gifts and opportunities are more valuable than those without, if you don't have God. So where else do you find value? But friends, I think the beauty of the Bible and the beauty of this story is that the servant's value is not in how much they have or what they can do, but in the fact that the master gave them what they have. Their value is not in their giftings, but in the giver and the value that he gives them. Their value is not something that they control. Don't get to assign ourselves value. Some of us here might tend to undervalue ourselves, or to undervalue those that are like us, those that don't have gifts or ability or talent like others, those who don't have opportunity or money. And the good news of the Bible is that your worth is not wrapped up in what you can do or not do. Your worth is the one who has given you everything that you have. We don't get to assign ourselves value. It also means that for those of us who think that we're all that, for those of us who think that we are pretty valuable, I mean, you're all right. But like at the end of the day, the difference is between 2 talents and 5 talents, right? It's not that much. And your value is finally in the fact that you have been given everything that you have. You didn't make it yourself. There's no concept of a self-made man in the Bible. No concept of a pull yourself up by your bootstraps in the Bible. Everything that you have has been given to you by God. And so you have infinite value, but you also have equal value. Your life is worth much, but it's also worth just as much as everyone else. All of this rests on the reality that there is a giver, that there is a God, a master over all. And I don't want you to miss the shock of this passage, the shock that Jesus is telling this story, because his claim is huge here up front. He is claiming to be that master. He is claiming that he is and has the authority of God. Don't miss what's going on here. I hope that this is good news to you. I hope that this is encouraging news to you this morning, that there is actually opportunity to live a life to the fullest, to live a life of value, no matter who you are or what you have. But I hope you also recognize that depends on the fact that Jesus is King, that Jesus is God and Master. And so he gets to define that life to the fullest. Not you and not me. We do not get to define what it means to live life to the fullest. God does. Which is a good thing, I think. It's like the child who gets a guitar for Christmas, and rather than asking what it is or how to use it or what to do with it, recognizing that it's been given to them, they decide this is going to make a great paddle to hit my siblings with. Just goes after that knot. Whether or not you think that would be a fun idea, I definitely know there was an age at which I did. You also got to recognize that the child is missing out on something beautiful because they never stopped to realize and recognize that what they had been given was intended for a specific purpose. And if they had paused to ask, Mom, Dad, you gave this to me. How should I use this? How can I make the most of it? Then horizons would have been opened and expanded for them. Friend, I think the same is true of our lives. If we're going to know how to live life to the fullest, we have to stop defining what it is, recognize that it is a gift from God, and ask how we should use it. Which brings us to our second point. If there are different provisions, we live in a world of provisions, different people. We got to ask, well, how do you live like that? How do you live life to the fullest? We come to our second point, different practices. The answer to that question is be faithful with what you got. Be faithful with what you got. See, we see 2 different reactions to the fact that they have been given something. The first 2 servants get busy. They get faithful. They each take what they got and they put it to use. Put it another way, they give everything they've got because they realize they have been given everything they've got. They don't stop to ask, well, I have more or less than another person. In gratitude for what they have, they put it to work. They get busy. They get faithful. Friend, life to the fullest is not in wondering whether or not how much you have or how much other people have. The key to life to the fullest is to be faithful with what you got. I think it is a life that Jane lived. A life that, if you didn't know her very well, you might say she didn't have that much. She wasn't a 5-talent person, you might say. She probably couldn't do that much. She probably wouldn't be that useful. And yet I think she was a picture far more than myself, and I would imagine far more than you, of someone who is faithful with what they have. Someone who used to every last drop, everything that God had given them. Jane's life was a picture of faithfulness, a picture of someone like these first two servants who took what she had and put it to use. Jane is like a grandmother figure in my life. I only met her later in her life when I was a child. And yet this was a woman who maybe wasn't going overseas to do great missions work, maybe wasn't getting up to preach on Sunday morning, but a woman nonetheless who took an interest in my life, who cared for me, who asked me questions about myself, who modeled what it looks like to live faithfully at the end of your life. A woman who will have had infinite impact on my life and so many other people here because she was faithful with what she had. Which is good news that all you have to do is be faithful what you had. In the words of the old preacher, it is hard to work with what you don't have. Mm-hmm. It is hard to use what you don't have, but the Bible doesn't ask you to do that. The Bible just asks you to work with what you got and to make what you make, right? The first one puts in his 5 talents and he makes 5 talents. The other one puts in his 2 talents and makes 2 talents. The 2-talent person didn't need to make 5 talents. He just needed to work with what he had. And the 5-talent person, man, he made 5 talents, and that's great. But he still needs the 2-talent person. He didn't make 7 talents, right? Friend, however much or little you have, be faithful with what you've got. It has been given to you. This is the picture of life to the fullest, a picture of a meaningful life, which makes the third servant so much worse. The opportunity of life to the fullest is right there. It doesn't matter how much you have, and yet along comes the third servant, and rather than putting it to work, he hides it away. It's a terrible picture of unfaithfulness, of failing to live life to the fullest. Friend, it is a picture of sin at the end of the day. There are a lot of descriptions and definitions of sin in the Bible, but I think this is such a helpful one. Because basically, right here, sin is not living life to the fullest. It is living a less than life. It is choosing to take what you have been given and not put it to use. Not go all in, not give it everything you got. Sin is not about like rules and regulations and God trying to keep you from being happy. Sin is actually living less than life, less than joy, less than faithfulness and goodness. And the invitation of the Bible is you could actually live life to the fullest. You could actually live the way you were designed to do. You could live the kind of life of joy and hope and faithfulness that Jane did. If you are here this morning and you are realizing that you want to live that kind of life with whatever God has given you, you find you are not, friend, I have good news for you. Because the same Jesus who called his people to live this kind of life, the same Jesus who had given them everything that they had so that they could live this kind of life, would just after this, I'm talking like the next chapter after this, go to his death on the cross to free people so that they could live this kind of life, to rescue people from the slavery to slothfulness, to rescue people from the slavery to a less than life, and free people to life to the fullest, to free people so that they could be faithful with everything that he had given them. And that is the good news of the gospel, that Jesus' death on the cross is rescue to life. You might be asking, this is great, and maybe you're happy that Jen lived that way, but why am I asking you to live this way? Why does it matter that everyone here take this seriously, that everyone here hear these words? I mean, it's great and all, but maybe it's not your cup of tea, right? Well, friend, we've seen there's different provisions, and there are different practices with those provisions. Finally, in our text, we come to different payoffs. There are different payoffs. See, the story started with a master who was away, a master who gave his servants what they had and asked them to use it well, and then went on his way. But the story ends with the master coming back. master comes home and everyone has to give an account. Friends, if you hear nothing else this morning, hear this. The master is coming back. And you will have to give an account for how you lived your life. He might be away right now. You might not be able to see Jesus. It might be tempting to believe that he's not really real. He's not really Lord. He's not really God. But he is coming back. And you will have to settle up. You might doubt that. You might question that. But just think about it for a second. Everything else that he said he would do, he did do. Jesus showed up and said, I'm Lord, let me prove it, and healed a whole bunch of people. Jesus said, y'all are going to kill me, and they did. Jesus said 3 days later, I'm going to get up from the dead, and he did. He demonstrated over and over and over again that he is faithful to his word. How much more faithful will he be to this word? That he is coming back. And you will have to give an account. So what's going to happen when he does? What are you going to say? How are you going to tell him that you lived your life? There's really only two options. This reality that he's coming back is actually good news for the first two servants who have been working faithfully, who have used what he's given them. Oh, when he returns, it is a glorious thing. It is good news. It's the kind of reaction that Jane had all the way up until her death. Not afraid, but looking forward to it. Because at that moment, it is the return of her master. At that moment, she gets to say, Master, I used well what you gave me. Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. I used those 2 talents, and here are 2 more talents. Master, you gave me 5 talents. I used those 5 talents, and here are 5 more. And look at the master's reaction. Right there in verse 21. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Friend, the response, don't miss this. Don't miss this because this is the best news you've heard all day. The response to living life to the fullest right now is that when you get to the end, it's just life to the fullest forever. The response to living well right now is goodness forever. The response to joy right now is joy forever. This is not you need to live a difficult, dutiful, just drudgery life right now, and it's going to be terrible. But at least when you get to the end, it'll be worth it. No, this is, you're going to live the life that you were always designed to live. The life in which God has given you everything that you have. And you just need to use that and just live well with that. And then when you get to the end, God will say, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into joy forever. Enter into bliss forever. This is the good news of the Christian life. This is the hope that Christians have. That one day the Master will return, either while we are still living or at the time of our death. We will stand before him and say, Master, I used what you gave me. I was faithful with what I had because I knew you were coming back. Friends, you can have life now and life later. It was Jane's hope. I wonder if it is yours this morning. If it is not, there is another option. The other option is the third servant. The servant who hid that money, who did not live life to the fullest, who was not grateful for what he'd been given, and now stands before the Master. You can hide what you have, you can fail to use what you have, but you cannot hide on that day. And as he stands before the Master, he gives an account for the way he lived his life. Look at what he says in 24. Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. It is a picture of someone who despises God, of someone who hates God, of someone, though they have been given everything and though they have been offered life, decided, I'd rather not have it. And so now he will reap what he's sown. As much as the good news, the hope of the Christian life is true, so is the news that we find here. That for the one who does not live life to the fullest, for the one who is not grateful for what he has been given, for the one who does not use what she has and live life to the fullest, there is judgment on that last day. Because essentially what the servant is saying is, look, I realize that you're a good master who gave me everything, but I did not want to use it. It is a declaration of disrespect, defiance, and it is met with judgment. Friend, as much as the hope is true and good, so is the news of judgment. So I'll ask again, what is your hope on that day? What will you do at the end of the world? Will you live life to the fullest now, looking forward to that? Or will you squander what you've been given and stand before God in judgment on that day? I pray that you will be faithful with what you've got, because the giver is coming back. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, we long for you to come back, because we know that you are a good giver who has given us so much. We know that you are a God who has called us to live life now so that we might know life then. We know that you are a God who has rescued us even from our unfaithfulness and disrespect of you, and freed us to now live life well. God, we pray that we would, like Jane, live faithfully until that day that you come back. That we would, like Jane, be able to say, Master, you have given me what I had and I used it well. You might call us into your joy on that day. Pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Anybody need more time? No. Everybody good?
Yep.
I would encourage you.
I think it's just that idea that we just need to be kind of faithful with what you got. I think that, it's very similar to like that A. Lewis Patterson idea, but just, the idea of just be faithful with what you got. You don't need to do kind of incredible things. In fact, look, you're whatever, you're 2 talent, 5 talent, not that, there's not even a huge difference there. But being faithful with what you have, the response is always well done. You don't need to change the world or,
Yes, sir.
I think you really brought out encouraging thought about the value and worth that people have, and then that's also a call to great joy. So I really like that.
Just encouragement to realize that I don't get to define how to live to the fullest. Only God does. And a lot of that is just, if God is in charge of how, is in control and define my living, then I need to trust in Him. I need to put my hope in Him, because the hope is there. It's not the hope. The hope is not the way I define things. It's the way He defines things. So it's a good reminder.
I was encouraged with reminded that the value of the thing is not the gift, but in the giver, in God. even when I know that the thing that he gave me is very important, but more important is him. And that was very encouraging to me.
Theo, unless Isaiah, do you want to try?
I did have one. Sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was just, it was an encouraging reminder, kind of like what you were saying about how everything that I have been given has been given to me by God, and I can only live to the fullest if I were to first recognize that Jesus is the master and giver.
I think I was encouraged by a reminder again that a good life doesn't need to be like an extravagant life. It can be a simple life. Excellent.
Yeah, similar. Just encouraging to know that I don't have to live outside of my ability, right? Like it's just I can live myself or live as myself with what God has given me.
Yeah, I was gonna say something to the effect I don't have to actually feel the burden of what is it that I have to do? Am I fulfilling all of my calling? And it's well, I mean, probably just need to be faithful to whatever God's given you. It's a lot easier thing to determine.
Yeah, I thought you did a good job. Where I felt encouraged, in that whole section where you were talking about how value is in the giver, and how sometimes we can tend to either undervalue or overvalue ourselves. But as you lock in on Him, He's the one that assigns our value, not ourselves. So that was very helpful to me personally. So what could you have done better?
Yeah, there's a couple things. So I think the two things that are most to me, I wish I'd tied that ending a little tighter. I wish I'd figured out what was gonna really kind of drive home that ending. I think I had kind of the concept, but yeah. And I think the other thing is just I really cut down any sort of illustrations, jokes, that kind of stuff, being that it's a eulogy, but then it also is is it just kind of boring? So, yeah.
I kind of get why you use the tension of did her life have any value?
Yeah.
I like the tension idea, but that I didn't really like it to be used with her life. So at a funeral for some reason, maybe it's just me, but I think just the way you brought up her life, her life didn't have any value. You kind of said that. You said
She's gone.
Yeah, this chick right here.
Yeah. And then you said
Awkward phrasing.
yeah. And then you said
Yeah.
she didn't get up to preach. I'm like, well, she shouldn't. So
Yeah, I mean, there's still something
sorry, that's on mine.
Rick Warren would disagree.
No,
it's just awkward phrasing of
just the whole using that for tension. I understand we need to answer that question.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't hold it out there for so long to resolve it.
maybe the very end and then answer right after. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here and say, given the fact that you're portraying her as a saint, and everybody would have known that.
Yeah.
You should have started with your intro. What made her life a good life?
Yeah,
Instead of trying to pretend was she good or not.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So so you just go what made her life a good life? What makes any life a good life?
Yeah.
Right. What makes any life matter?
Yeah.
Right.
Same things instead of approaching it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. I also had a different intro, and so again, it was more apocalyptic, and I'm that's probably
That's probably
great.
Wise move.
I didn't have anything else, so that's chilling. You what you got?
It was hard to know where you were in the text.
Yep.
Because you're jumping to one alphabetical point to one alphabetical point, but
Yeah.
where are you?
Right. Point out the verses.
Yeah.
I realized that halfway through, and I was like, so here in verse 3. Yeah. I was like, oh man, I haven't pointed a single time, like where in the text exactly we are. Yeah.
I don't know if I loosen this part, but you said this. Jesus claimed that he is the master.
Yep,
Where
Yeah.
the text say that?
that's right.
Right.
Yeah, and you double down on like this text is laying this thing down. You
Because
can't
I,
believe it.
I know that in theology usually that is true,
I know.
but in the text,
I watched it happen in that moment, and I was like, we just gotta keep going. I watched Jeremy. I might have seen YouTube just like write something. I was like, oh, come on. I'm getting enough of this feedback, and we're just gonna move on. Yeah, no, it's good.
Isaiah, if you got something.
May not be something, but I was thinking, I should have written it down honestly. But whenever you were talking about like who had like, when you're talking about like the person with 5 talents versus 2 talents, and like some people have, your value is not based on what things you have. Or no, and you were trying to say like just use what you have, and maybe if somebody at a funeral who might be feeling just really in despair or hopeless, would it have been a good idea to address someone who feels like they have nothing?
Yeah.
And because like your point was like just use what you have, and
Right.
like at a funeral, a lot of
Yeah.
people are feeling pretty
Yeah.
like they've lost a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
What
No, that's good.
you can say about that.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So like on context use, like at the first part of your sermon, you have a lot of context, and it was a little bit confusing to follow. I would have cut that, and a way to ground that this master returning is Jesus. Is how I think I would have pointed out that this is a parable that comes in a series of parables, all about Jesus coming back.
So when you're talking cut the context, you're talking the stuff about like the temple.
Yeah, we didn't need any of that. I know it's harder when it's an exercise and it's a make believe dead person and family.
I can't believe it.
But yeah, especially like you somewhat get to hope towards the end.
Yeah.
But if I was somebody who was actually grieving, there was like very little comfort or hope in this sermon. And you didn't really talk specifically to the family at any point in the sermon.
Yeah. This is why we plan these things ahead.
So it kind of was better second point going into your third point. But my main thought was like your homiletical points actually don't really matter. Like your 3 P's, so that's nice or whatever. But like they didn't do any work for you.
Yeah.
You didn't really use them very much. So it was just like, oh, okay, there's 3 different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just kind of like why are the divisions there?
Right.
Yeah, I was going to pick up on that. I think you started moving into your second movement, different practices, like right around the 15-minute, 45-second mark. And it was like, okay, the arc of the sermon seemed to be a little bit,
Too much on the first point. Not
yeah,
enough on the.
yeah. It's because there were some places in that part where you were dealing with the value.
Just like save that.
It was different provisions, but the connection between provisions and value and all that, and how somehow or another you could have cleaned that up and made it shorter, so you can move forward a little bit better.
I felt like the conclusion could have been wrapped up quicker. So like I felt like you were circling around for a while, like especially you've got the joy piece, and that was really hopeful and great. But then kind of on that call or whatever to be ready.
Yeah. Kind of like make the call and then cut it.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
felt like that part kept going a ways, and I don't know if you would flip those two things and end with the joy because you want to send them out with hope. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But no, I think that is right.
I think would have been helpful to flash out level of practicality. I mean,
Yes.
I'm just kind of echoing what Isaiah was saying. Like maybe somebody lost, is there in despair or doesn't have anything, or what does what you got mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
flash that out.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah.
So that would have been helpful.
In the OG sermon notes, I had more of a section on that. But I just like kind of forgot it, and also it was more like context, and so now it's like, oh shoot. But yeah, it stayed pretty high level.
You said something that I didn't find in the text at the beginning. That is a joke. But
I was like, man, I did something bad thing. I'm really gonna like, I'm really just getting destroyed.
No,
I was
right.
like, oops, I'm out of here. 10 weeks in, I'm out. You're not even preaching the Bible, bro.
No, just I think it's a little, but
Yeah.
when you start to reading, you stop it and then to comment something about the context.
Yes, yeah. So I obviously wouldn't have done that in a real sermon, but I just realized like, oh shoot, I need to clarify she's a believer. So yeah.
You have to be clear first to do that.
Yes.
I don't know, just-
We weren't in it yet.
You can go best.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Isaiah, you got anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Okay. I think like the one thing like really to work on for the sermon, like if I put your main point on like a Hallmark card,
Yeah.
it would. I don't think anybody would like disagree with it. So like you have a gospel connection there, but I think even if I was like not a Christian, I could still hear your sermon. It's like, yeah, I should live life to the fullest.
I understand that the title, "Life to the Fullest," live life to the fullest, but you don't think that the idea of like the giver is coming back?
I'm not sure. I personally didn't like. If I was just a secular person, didn't
Yeah.
have anything like that would
Against it.
switch me to like something more of a Christian aim, other than to just make the most of what I have in life right now.
Kind of in tandem with that. I think you argued in this sermon, your fullest life in the present comes from living with what you have. Like that seemed to be more of what, and then like kind of at the end we get the little God thing coming back. But
Yeah.
but like mostly it was like, hey, go live your best life now and do that by living in line with what you have.
Yeah. So I think I wrestled in this sermon. I don't want to just be like, God's coming back, guys, the whole time. Like that does kind of hang there until the end. But
I mean,
how do you hint at that without there's
by 19, God is back.
right.
So it doesn't hang till the end.
Well, it hangs till the third point because the third point is all wrapping that up.
Yeah.
Figuring out, like, all right, there's two kind of outcomes.
Yeah.
So I mean, this isn't just. I think you're right because I felt like, man, a lot of this sermon, I really tried to make sure in my main point there's something there about that. But how do you?
Oh, I think your main point is good.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is in the preaching,
Yeah.
how do you like hint at that without just giving it away? Because you do feel it in the story, like the master leaves, but they're working, and you kind of know like he's coming back.
I mean, honestly, I think with a lot of the parables, this one included,
Yeah.
like right up front, you're like, this isn't hard to understand.
Right.
Like none of us are lost at what this means.
Right.
And maybe if you had done the Theo thing, which like this is coming in a series of parables about Jesus coming back.
Yeah. That's
Because this is about him coming back.
right.
So even in the middle, it's like, well, remember, we know that this is in a series of parables about him coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But we were just kind of sprinkle it in there.
Yeah.
And then my thing was going to be like, you had this like, he's faithful to his word to return stuff.
Yeah.
You had it at the beginning of your third point. That should have been at the end of your third point. You should have laid it all down, and then you're really closing on like,
Right.
well, but is he going to do this? Is he going
Yeah.
to come back? then you're like, well, let me tell you, and then you kind of go like, he's always been faithful to his word, right? Which is why you should believe both the promise and the threat, right? That kind of thing. That's how you're kind of leaving it.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
good.
Because it gets buried in the third point, and you're just ending on like, so,
Make
Right.
the best of it.
make a good choice. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say something similar, because I thought that was a nice run, everything he said he would do,
Yeah.
he did, but it was like he threw it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So if you had done
Yeah.
what
Now
he
moving
just-
on from that to other things. And you're like, oh,
if you'd done what he had just said, because you already said the things I was gonna say about the illustrations and even the ending, your ending would have been helped with either an illustration, but if you didn't have an illustration,
Yeah.
if you would take what he just said and then ran with it,
Yeah.
everything he said he would do, he did. Remember, he said this, and then,
Yeah.
and ultimately on the cross, and then
Yeah.
you just run with it.
Yeah.
All right, what did you do well?
I think tried to like highlight the goodness of this, that it's like this is a good thing, and the Christian conception of life to the fullest is better. That we all are trying to figure out like what is life to the fullest, and actually the Christian conception of it is best.
Okay.
I think in your third point where you talk about forever joy and just how your tone matched really well with what you're trying to say. Like your whole countenance kind of changed, and you like exuded that joy
Yeah.
with your energy and everything else. That was a really good moment.
Yeah, you did a good job highlighting the positive and the negative of living life. Like in the majority of your sermon at the beginning, you highlight the positive until you touch on like the sin part. Like sin is not living life to the fullest.
Yeah.
Like so, and at the second half, mostly at the second half too, you highlight that okay, the negative part of living life is like don't sin no more, and then you talk about practical element of less than life, less than joy, less than goodness, less than faithfulness, all kind of stuff. Before you actually jumped into your gospel connection, so negative and positive aspect of living life was present.
I think that you did really well was in the second point, you handled well the value of your argument of that point in the combination of the questions, statement, and even practical example of that. And I think that it was really good.
Some good gospel connections, and I thought specifically how you defined sin in this passage. I thought that was cool. But, how you just made that direct link to sin, what the third servant did.
I think it is like you're preaching against your type to pull back on jokes, pull back on humor, and do those things. But I think it was the right move for a funeral, and I thought your tone was right for like somber, serious.
Sounded like a eulogy.
Yeah, but it was good. That's you don't want to be too trivial.
Yeah.
Even like when you brought like kids with Christmas gifts, an element of excitement there that you added in there.
Yeah, I thought when you came back to Jane after the intro, like you did a great job of holding her up as like, oh, this is an example of somebody who did it well. And I think us having examples of people who have gone before us living well is really important in the Christian faith, and it was encouraging.
Yeah, so I thought that it was really a solid move. We talked about maybe getting more specific on like using what you've got.
Yeah.
But you did this really good thing where you're like, okay, well, they're getting different things? Does this mean they're more or less valuable? And then you kind of like, well, I mean, even the one who gets one, that's like 20 years worth of wages, so everybody gets a lot.
Yeah.
But there's still the thing, and you kind of go back to it, and then you're like, and maybe if there's no God, like what else do you have but just relative value? But Christians actually have something different because this is all given to them. So there's like this kind of just neat little apologetic thing where you're kind of like, you're not yelling at unbelievers, but you are kind of like, I mean, if you don't have God, what is value based on? We all know that like value based on like, relative whatever you got is kind of jacked.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good way to just kind of be like, I don't know, well, maybe I should consider this. Then that seems compelling. It was a good move. You didn't take forever with it, but you spent enough time with it to be like, oh, you're definitely playing around with this.
So I thought one of the best moves you made, in addition to what he just said, is at the end of your second movement, where you put in a gospel connection, and then right after that, you asked a question. So you talked about how in the very next chapter, Jesus is going to go, to the cross, and so on and so forth. And then you asked something along the lines, well, why does this matter? And so on and so forth. And it led right into your third point. So that was a nice little drill right there of not only using context well, but laying in a gospel connection well that worked well right where you put it, but it didn't take away from what you were trying to do at the end as well. You could have ratcheted it up at the end, but it was nice to lay one down right there and then let it move you into your third movement.
Yeah, I liked how you came back to it in the third movement, and especially what he was saying before that, kind of that run about he did what he says he was going to do, like with his death, his resurrection. And so there were some moments, not only there, but elsewhere, I believe, too. It was just like you used kind of a play on words or run of words that were really useful.
What I think you did well was actually asking a bunch of questions. You asked a bunch of questions and you made them pay off very well. And just to situate the hearers, us hearers, like, okay, you didn't just leave us hanging, but you were just asking the question, just like, okay, the answer answers the question.
Yeah.
And you did that well also with your transitions and stuff. So that was well done there.
I like the way that you connect this life with our life in the future, and how this life is important in the way that you live. But the life is coming. It's going to be better with joy. That I think that this was a great movement in your documentation to apply to everyone too. That was great.
I thought like from a writing perspective, there were a couple times you repeated the phrase "work with what you got." Go and get busy with what you got, and you played with that phrase and flipped it a couple times in your sermon really effectively. So I thought like when you were like, that was a good way to drill down your main point again, and repeat it a couple times without me catching it or getting more into it. So.
I thought throughout the sermon, you did a great job of just putting everybody on the same playing field, believer, unbeliever. It's like you didn't even have to distinguish between the two because the questions that you were asking were just universal. So.
Yeah, so I think that, you hear this sermon preached 1,000 times, and the one talent dude's always just a moron, and he is, for sure. Yeah. But, like, that's all, and then you had this interesting way of making us all understand that he's also really sad, right? Like, because he's not only doing the wrong thing, but he's also doing, like, the less human thing. So it was like, oh, yeah, man, like, that's a real bummer. It's not just like, what an idiot. Yeah. But I thought that was a really effective move to be like, see, that's actually like you had this line where like Jesus saves us from sloth. I was like, okay, I'm stealing that for sure. Because it was that idea of like, don't be this guy, not because it's wrong, but because it's like less than you could actually experience life. And this is the very thing that Jesus saves you for.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. That was a very good move. I think structurally, you know, even though you didn't pin down, okay, where you were with the verses,
Yeah.
I think structurally what you were doing was working, but I think if you had just changed instead of, well, what was your first P? Provision, instead of provision, practice, and payoffs.
Yeah.
If you would just use the statements that you were in there, that you used in the content, that is to say, okay, well, live life to the fullest. You got to be faithful with what the giver is giving you till he's get back, till he comes back. Well, how can I be faithful, or what does that look like? Well, it means appreciating the provisions that he's providing for you, right?
Yeah.
Or being faithful with what you got. That would have been more memorable.
Yeah.
And we tack down more
Yeah,
on the
text.
thing.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you could just, you know, as a throwout line, you know, the provision, the practice, the payoff.
Yeah.
Just as a further tack down.
Right.
But what you were actually arguing was making sense
Right.
in the thing, but it was getting buried.
Under. Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good.
There we go.
It is. It's over.
That's a wrap. Till he comes again.